Hey everybody, today I decided to share some of your guys' paranormal and ghost stories. This first story comes from, and I hope I'm saying your name right, from Stepanka from the Czech Republic. I don't even know how to say, I don't know how to pronounce things. I might have been about 11 or 12. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, which was downstairs at the time. I was happy to find that the light was turned on downstairs in the living room, and what I thought, in my sleep dumb head, was my mom standing in the middle of the room. Thinking about it now, I don't know how I thought it was my mom, because I clearly recall it was a very dark figure with a cape and a hood over their head. Something I since found out is very common to see. Anyway, I told my mom, please wait for me so we could go upstairs together. The figure did not respond or move, just stood there, facing the stairs. I went to the bathroom, and when I emerged, the light in the living room was turned off and no one was there. I hurried upstairs and went to my mom, asked her why she didn't wait for me. Turns out she was asleep the whole time. This next story comes from Cat Spear in Surrey, England. When me and my sister were a lot younger, toddlers, my dad used to work nights, so to give my mom a bit of a break, my nan would come sometimes and have us over for the weekend. So one weekend evening, we were at Nan's, Dad was at work, and my mom was in our house all alone. For about a month or so before this, she had been hearing some weird noises and getting weird feelings, and so this night she just flipped. The noises came back, but instead of being freaked out, she got annoyed. I guess she was tired from being a young mom with 3 kids, and she ended up shouting at the top of her lungs, "If someone's there, show yourself." Well, back then, in the early 90s, we had those plug-in baby monitors where you plugged one in the baby's room and where you listened, not like a walkie-talkie, you know, the old school baby monitors. As soon as she finished shouting, the loudest static noise came from the baby monitor she had plugged in downstairs, and another odd noise she couldn't explain. The weird thing about it, though, was the monitor wasn't even turned on at the switch upstairs or down where hers was, and no one else was in the house. Safe to say she called my dad at work right after. No explanation still to this day. This next story comes from Katie, and the location is anonymous. So I left my bedroom door open one night and fell asleep. It was about 2 a.m. when I woke. I thought I heard someone screaming and guessed it was just a dream, but when I sat up and looked down the hallway, I saw a man. I didn't recognize him. He was wearing a brown coat and a top hat. I blinked a few times just to see if it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but the figure didn't go away. Instead, he walked towards my brother's room. Then I remembered, about 2 years before, my brother told me he was being followed by a shadow man he called Picasso. His description matched perfectly with what I saw. This next story comes from Michelle, located in Florida. A brief background: when I was 7, my twin sister passed away from a horrible accident. This story takes place at about 9 in the morning when I was around 17 years old, 1 year ago. I was in my bedroom and had woken up about 30 minutes prior. My mother was at work and my dad was in Louisiana visiting family. I was home alone, and yet I heard 5 very loud knocks at my bedroom door. My door was locked, and when I was holding the doorknob, I realized that I was supposed to be home alone. I swung the door open and no one was there. I got an uncomfortable feeling and left my room and into the kitchen. At this point, I could hear the faint sound of children giggling. I may be wrong, but I think it was my twin sister. To this day, I sleep with my door locked. This next story comes from John, located in Houston, Texas. San Antonio railroad tracks. Long story short, 3 of us visited the haunted tracks where a busload of kids died in an accident with a train collision. I think that is how the story goes. We parked our car about midnight or so and put in neutral and turned the car off. After only a few minutes, there were several lightning strikes, and then 10 to 15 large bright white orbs came out of the woods to the left of us. Once all out, they started hovering towards our vehicle. We all sensed such a heaviness in the air. One passenger started panicking and could not stand the uncertainty anymore, and we had to split immediately. We never got to see what else was about to unfold. This next story comes from Kaisha Krona in New Zealand. I hope I said your name right. My parents and I were staying at a hotel in South Island in Anu. I don't know how to say that. Ooh, I'm sorry. I was laying in bed as I couldn't fall asleep. It was a shared room with my parents, who were asleep next to my bed. I was scrolling through my music on my phone when I look over to the front of my parents' bed and see a dark, cloaked figure. At first I thought it was just a sweater hanging up when suddenly it turned and slowly moved to the corner of the room. I kept looking into the shadows when it slowly moved towards my mom on the far side of the room. I could not make out a face because the cloak hood was covering where the face would be. At this point, I was so scared I turned around and just closed my eyes. When I looked back, it was gone. But the best I could describe what it looked like was the Grim Reaper. This next story comes from Anna X. It had been a while since I'd been back to my old grammar school where I also go to church. So I googled it. Big mistake, because I was flooded with memories about the dead boy. Some time ago, a young boy of the school was supposedly hung, still wearing the school's uniform. The uniform consisted of a white t-shirt with a navy blue tie. The pants matched the color of the tie. A priest vanished shortly after the boy went missing, and it can be assumed that the priest may have had something to do with the hanging. There are people who believe the young boy still walks the basement hallway of the school, and is said to have a rope tied around his neck. Those who believe they've seen him say you can still see him walking the halls at a slow pace. There have been no mention of anyone harmed since by the spirit who continues to walk the hallways. When I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, I had a friend that said she'd seen him. It was not long until all the kids said that they would have seen him. It bothered me because I really had seen him. An old woman that used to be my only friend when I started kindergarten there told me if I ever saw him not to talk to him because he had to move on and he couldn't have a friend as good as me to keep him here. This next story comes from Bailey, located in Ontario, Canada. My dad and I go ghost investigating and urban exploring. We were on a ghost investigation one night in the States at an old abandoned asylum, and it's truly an amazing place. They also mentioned the asylum is located in Bethany, New York. It was a poor farm before being an asylum, but it was open from 1827 to 1974. It definitely is a building with history and plenty of spirits. When we first walked through the front doors, I got this awful feeling of dread and sorrow. I took a moment and went for a smoke to see if that would help, but I started to cry and just felt so upset. After about 10 minutes of that nonsense, I went on the tour to get a feel of how big the place was and where everything was located. We were walking down one of the main hallways, which had patient rooms and day rooms. We were stopped in the middle of the hall to listen to some history, and I was standing beside a doorway which led to the staircase. My dad and I had split up somehow during the tour, and when the man was talking, I swear I heard a woman scream from one of the lower levels from the staircase. My stomach dropped, and I looked around to see if anyone reacted to it, but everyone was focused on the tour guide. One of the well-known ghosts is an old woman who tends to scream to let herself be known. Later on in the night, we were walking around on one of the upper levels, which is known to be haunted by one of the nurses, which her name is Nurse Emmy. She was known as a not-so-nice lady in her lifetime and now in spirit. Once we walked up the stairs to the top level, which has her room in it, I got this weird feeling of someone preparing to pounce on me like a cat. I know it sounds weird, but it felt like they were against the wall, crouching, keeping their eye on me. It truly made me feel uneasy, but my dad felt completely fine, so I went on. The feeling never went away, and we were walking down one of the hallways, and my dad said he felt something foul, like death or decay. I smelt nothing, and I got the feeling that was the sign to leave, so I honestly ran for the stairs and left the building for a few minutes to get some fresh air. This next story comes from Jordan, located in Oklahoma. This particular incident happened when I was about 6 years old. 6 years old. Old, not old. I was living with my grandmother in her older home that had quite a history behind it involving the Great Depression. There were always little paranormal things that went on almost daily, but this incident always sticks out in my mind. I was by myself in the backyard swinging when I had noticed a group of children who looked to have been my age, and they came near me. I had never seen these children before, but they were wearing what appeared to be 1920s attire. They were smiling, running, and chasing each other. Me, being so young, I didn't think anything of it. I wanted to play with them, but once I tried to join them in their game of tag, they all ran away, except one little boy who was in the group who stayed and just stared at me for a few seconds before taking off. They just ran off and vanished. I remember that day like it was yesterday. By far the most bizarre thing to have happened to me while I lived at that home. This next story comes from Madeline, located in Rochester, New York. Last year, my mother moved into a new apartment, and the first night that I ever stayed there, I had 2 paranormal experiences. The first is when I was in her living room by myself. I heard heavy breathing and growling from behind some of her unpacked boxes, and it eventually made its way right next to me, and I could actually feel the breath down my neck. But when I looked around, there was absolutely no one around. The second one happened the same night, and again in the living room. I woke up in the middle of the night to see a man standing outside the kitchen watching me. Keep in mind, absolutely no men live with my mother or in any of the other apartments. This next story comes from Randy, located in West Virginia. One day, about a year ago, I was babysitting a little girl named Cameron. She was around 5 or 6 years old. I was trying to take her downstairs into the basement to get a board game, and as soon as we got down the steps, she started screaming. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me there was a monster in the basement. This was disturbing, especially since my bedroom was in the basement at the time. So we went back upstairs for a while, and then finally she started looking down the stairs and asking to go back down there. When we went down, this time my sister was with us. Instead of screaming, Cameron sits on the floor of my bedroom and starts whispering. My sister asks her who she's talking to, and she responds saying she is talking to the dead girl in the house. She tells us the dead girl came from the woods behind our house, and she is now living in my room. At this point, my sister and I are looking at each other with our mouths hanging open in complete shock. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. This next story comes from an anonymous person located in Pennsylvania. So about a year ago, I had a friend who claimed he had a ghost of a little girl who followed him since he was little, but he never told me any specific experiences. I had also never had any experiences prior to this, but directly after he shared a specific experience, things started happening to me, such as unexplained banging, jumping from wall to wall on my 4 walls, one being the side of my house, and I'm on the 2nd floor. My front door also unlocked itself while I was sitting in the living room. One day when I was in the kitchen, I believe I saw a shadow in the room next to me. Also something that happened around the same time, but I'm not sure if it is connected. If it's connected, is I was walking to the store and a big wolf-looking animal appeared across the street. It didn't look domestic and it didn't have a collar. I also had never seen it before. I backed up because I was sure it would charge at me or something. It looked directly at me and turned around and trotted away. I haven't seen it since. Nothing happened after that. You know, that's weird. That just brought back a memory for me. This next story comes from Robert Mills, located in Glasgow, Scotland. My family and I live in a very old house. I was born into my house and have only ever lived there. One night at dinner, my family and I somehow got onto the topic of how we believed the house to be haunted. We shared our experiences, and they all were the exact same, such as seeing dark shadows out of the corner of your eye in the mirrors, feeling watched, hearing things moving in empty rooms, etc. But these things creeped us all out. A short time after we had renovated our attic into more bedrooms, my sister said she was home alone and was walking across the upstairs landing and looking down the staircase and saw an old woman looking up at her with a face that looked like she was screaming. That's actually like the scariest mental image ever right now. She ran back into her room and called the police because she thought that someone had broken into the house, but no one was there. I then said that I felt like every night when I walk from my room to the bathroom at night, I feel like there is a woman staring at me from the dark from the dining room. My mom also told us of how one day she was walking into the dining room to get to the kitchen. She laid down shopping bags and wasn't looking where she was going. She was just looking at the ground. Her mind was not thinking and said, "Excuse me," to get past someone standing there. They moved, and she said thank you. She was home alone, but my mom and dad then started talking about how when they went to look at the house before buying it, in the dining room was the living room, and the house was owned to two old spinster sisters, but one of them died in the house in the dining room, which was their living room 4 days before my parents moved in. We don't think she wanted to leave. So this story comes from Nellie. One day when I was walking my dog by the river we live by, it was around 6 or 7 in the afternoon. It was like any other day, nothing seemed out of the normal. We started heading back home, but my dog started to get anxious. As I tried to calm him down, I looked in the direction my dog was barking at, and I saw a little girl with ragged clothes standing a few feet away from us. I asked her where her parents were, but she gave no answer. After a few minutes of her staring at me, I got a strange feeling, so I decided to walk away. It was as if something was telling me to run or leave. So I start walking at a brisk pace, and I decided to look back, but as I did, the girl was no longer there and the feeling had gone away. This next story comes from Jamie. I'm assuming that's your name, Jamie, from Cocoa, New York. Around Halloween last year, my best friend and I were walking home from this party. We were not intoxicated or anything, and there is this one block in my neighborhood that has a lot of old, creepy-looking houses. Now, there is this one house on the block that has been abandoned for some years, and as soon as I walked past it, I bursted out into tears. I walked to the other side of the street and refused to walk past the house, and at the time I passed the house, I blacked out. It was an unexplainable, heavy, dark feeling that just came over me. I did some research on the house to find out that years before, a couple committed suicide in the house. This next story comes from Wolfie, located in the USA. Ever since I was little, I could always see shadow people and experience weird things. My pop passed a little over a year ago, and one day in the spring we had family over to celebrate his birthday. This was in the middle of the day. My mom sent me to the living room to get something. As I'm walking down the stairs to the first floor, something stops me. Chills went up my spine. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a man leaning over the banister in the hallway. I turn my head and catch a glimpse, then like that, it's gone. Needless to say, I bolted down the stairs. I think this was my pop. This next story comes from Jessica. When I was 15, I lived with my parents and younger brother in an old house in upstate New York. We had recently moved in, and the house itself seemed nice enough, but my bedroom was missing a door. That sucks. Instead of replacing the door, I put up a beaded curtain. Oh, that's cool. Sometime in the middle of the night, I would hear someone walking up the stairs leading to my room, and then the clicking of the beads as if someone was walking through. One night, I saw a man's face looking through the beaded curtain at me. I kept blaming my brother until it happened a few nights when he wasn't home. I just got the chills, because just picture like a beaded curtain in the doorway, and then someone just peeking their head through. Oh my gosh. This next story comes from Deborah, located in Australia. I was sleeping over at my friend's house about 5 months ago. I was on her bed, and my friend was on the floor next to the bed. We were about to drift off to sleep when my friend felt footsteps on the ground, thinking it was her sister and her sister's friend. So my friend asked me to see if it's her sister walking around. And as I leaned up in the bed and looked to my right where the closet is, I see a little boy with darkish skin. I got a bit freaked out, so I told my friend I saw someone, and so she jumped up and turned on the light, and the boy disappeared. After telling my friend what I saw, she got freaked out and said that she would have dreams of a little Aboriginal boy, which is a native Australian, who would call out for help until she would wake up. This next story comes from Idel, I hope I say your name right, from Turkey. About a month ago, a friend of my mom stayed over at her house, and because my father was not home, I slept with my mom and gave my room to her. The following day's morning, she looked horrified, and when asked her what was wrong, she said that in the middle of the night, as she was sleeping facing the window, leaning on her right side, she felt a burning gaze looking at her, and when she turned to face the door to see the source of the disturbing feeling, she saw the dark figure of a little person with eyes looking straight at her. Later, she asked us if we if we keep any old antique goods at home. And when my mom suddenly remembered the old drawing of a family, a mother and daughter, she had purchased from an antique shop many years ago. When she took the picture out of the drawer, it was maintained in which was close to my doorway. My mom's friend gasped and pointed at the little girl, saying that she would never forget this gaze. This next story comes from Linda, located in Florida. I was living in Florida for a few months doing an internship. The company had put interns into an apartment together. I was living with 5 other girls and was sharing a room with one. A few weeks into the internship, weird things started to occur in the room I was staying in, mainly the closet. I always worked morning shifts and my roommate worked at night, so when I would go to bed, she wouldn't be home yet. There were times I would wake up to use the bathroom and the closet light would be on and my roommate wouldn't be home yet. Anytime anything of ours went missing, it usually ended up somewhere in the closet. None of the other girls believed my roommate and I about anything that we told them about the closet or anything. The one occurrence that freaked me out the most was when I was getting back from work. No one was in the apartment, and I heard a loud slam come from my room. As I walked in, the closet door was half open, and my roommate and I never left the door closed or wide open. So that's all I got time for today. Look forward to the one in the future. I don't know if I'll be doing this weekly, depending on how much time I have, but I will definitely be telling more of you guys' stories. I am a little backed up now with submissions, so stay tuned for when I start accepting submissions again. If I am accepting submissions, it will say down in the description below this video whether I am or I'm not. I'm backed up from October of 2014, so bear with me as I kind of get caught up on your guys' stories. So stay tuned for next time's story. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!